So good morning everyone. Once again we continue with number 7 in our series on marriage, and we're at the point where Paul talks about due benevolence. There must be due benevolence in the relationship, and this due benevolence is loving, caring, considering, and all these types of things where we try and understand the other person, we try and grow close to the other person. And this due benevolence is in everything. It's continuing, because that is the only way that there can be true intimacy, there can be true closeness between two people, is where this due benevolence is coming into all facets of the relationship, in all facets of it. So this has to do with how people talk to each other. How people talk. Whether they talk, whether they explain. Do they explain how they think and feel, and so on? It has to do with these things, and it has to do with actions. The actions of life. Due benevolence has to do with the actions of life, and so this is the common duties of life. Common duties and the great duties. It has to do with the challenges. But as people go through the droughts of life, the storms of life, the difficulties of life, the problems of life, then they should be acting as a team. As a team. And that is due benevolence. And in this team, go back to verse 4. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband. And likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. So Paul was talking particularly about the physical relationship, that two people should try and understand each other by communication on that very intimate level with each other, so that they can please each other in the physical side of their relationship. But this is not only in the bedroom, this is also throughout the day, this is throughout the whole of the time that they spend together, and when they're apart as well, that they will respect the relationship, that the person that they are connected to is that partner. When they're travelling separately, when the husband has to travel or the wife has to travel, they have that connection. And that connection should be maintained during those times too, wherever possible. And in this way they're showing respect for the other person, and for that their two has become one. But this is not just talking about power of our own body in the intimate things. It's talking about power of our own body in all things. that we have to consider the other person in all things when we're married. And then Paul goes on and reiterates this in the verse 5, where he says, defraud you not one another. In other words, this is a contract, this relationship. And yes, there are times when two people cannot join themselves together because of the time of the month or something like that, or other considerations. And as people get old, as people age, the relationship changes, and it needs to change, and they have to adapt. And this is a part of a good marriage too, adaptiveness. And adaptiveness is for all the different situations, because there is sickness that comes into life. There are emotional challenges. There are physical challenges in life. And two people must adapt to these situations. And this is a place and a part where due benevolence is the key to a good marriage. Due benevolence. And we know with a muscle, for instance, a muscle must stretch at times to reach something. We don't want it to break when it stretches. And a muscle must bend to different places at different times, and we don't want it to break. And so due benevolence, due consideration between two people when we are carrying out our life processes, we shouldn't be putting too much strain on those connections between the two who have become one. And so when people give themselves up to fasting, to prayer, afterwards they should come together again, is what Paul's saying here. And they do this with consent. Defraud you not one the other, except it be with consent for a time. So they should be in agreement about what they are planning to do. So this is good advice from Paul, and of course it shouldn't be taken to extremes, because we have to adapt in our lives to different things, to sickness, to emotional challenges, to physical impossibilities. And some things become physically impossible at different times of life, or as people aged up, as they age up. But still, each person should consider themselves, each other and themselves together as one person, as much as they can during those times. So Paul says, now, I speak this by permission and not of commandment. So Paul is a prophet, and the Lord didn't specifically tell him to say these things, but he had to address this question, and so he did, to the best of his ability, according to the principles that he understood from the Lord. And so he wasn't speaking as a mouthpiece of God in the direct sense, but as the word of God came to Paul, but he was speaking as someone who understood this situation very, very well. So we shouldn't dismiss this because it says he speaks by permission and not of commandment, because it's still important material for us to understand and to practice. So we'll stop there now, and we have to go to number 8 to continue.